Alright, fourth grade artists, today you are learning about a style of art called needle felting. Needle felting uses fabric and wool to create a piece of artwork. Today you are talking about the word onomatopoeia, a word that is a sound. And I started my onomatopoeia, so what I'm going to do is kind of talk you through the process here. Your first thing that you need to do is decide what onomatopoeia you are going to want to create with. I chose the word zap. Zap is a word that is a sound. So the first thing that I did was I used the tracers at the table to trace out my word, or my onomatopoeia. When you are tracing out the letters, you need to use a crayon, and your crayon is going to move slow and steady in short little lines, kind of like dashed lines, to make a traced out shape. Do you see how the crayon shows up on my fabric as I create the P? Once you have all of your letters traced out, you are going to be outlining. Outlining is when I have a color or a line that highlights that space. Okay, so I started that with green. You are going to be outlining today with yarn. When I measure out yarn, I pull it from the yarn barn. I never ever open the yarn barn unless there's a horrible knot, and then I close it right away. You're going to want to measure out about an arm span of yarn. You'll probably notice that you'll need more or less of that as you work, and that's okay. You can always come back for more. I started outlining with green, and I'm going to continue to do that around my A. Okay, and my letter is kind of not showing up. So if that happens to you, just come back in with a crayon, outline again, so that you can see where you need to work. Okay? So what you're going to get at the drive-thru today, after you've decided your onomatopoeia, is you need to choose a background color. You need to grab a piece of foam, and in your foam is a needle felting needle. Now this is very, very sharp, fourth grade, and there's these little notches on the side, and that's the part that ties these itsy bitsy knots in your fabric as you poke. I never ever walk around the room with just my needle felting needle. It is always in my foam. This is how I can carry it safely to my seat, or from my seat back to the drive-thru. So I have things outlined. I've got my green picked out. I've measured it from my yarn barn. I'm ready to start attaching or outlining my green line. Because my needle felting needle is so sharp, I'm never going to put my hands on my piece of fabric while I am working. I'm always going to use a popsicle stick to help me hold things in place, because I don't want to accidentally poke myself. Okay, so I've laid it out, I'm holding it down with my popsicle stick, and I'm going to poke that yarn. And the more pokes that I make, the better attached it will be. My hand is kind of like a sewing machine. It's just going up and down. Alright, I've come to a turn, so I'm putting my needle felting needle down. I'm going to arrange my yarn. I'm going to hold it with the popsicle stick, and then pick up my needle felting needle. It is so important that we follow that direction, fourth grade, so that you do not get hurt. It is not safe to have your hands where your needle felting needle is poking or working. Now, a lot of times I'll have friends that say, yep, this looks good, I'm done. And what I'll say to them, do you see how this little piece is coming up? If you don't poke it enough times, the yarn will not stay in place. What you're doing is tying little knots on the back side, or poking that yarn fiber through the felt to the other side. And I'll show you that on the back in a minute. Do you see those little green fuzzies coming through? That's what we're looking for, a thick green fuzzy coming through the other side. I didn't do a very good job felting here. There's no green fuzzies. So I would need to come back and do that. When I have gone through and outlined my whole letter, I'm ready to come back in and add a color on the inside. So we're going to pretend like my Z for zap has been outlined because I want to show you how to add this. This is called wool roving. And you're going to get wool roving from me up at my desk. This is an art teacher job because we never cut wool roving with the scissors. All you need to do is pull it apart. It's kind of like cotton candy. I'm going to give you a little bit of wool roving at a time, and this is what you need to do. Do you see how I'm using my fingers to spread out the wool roving so it's kind of like a big rectangle? It's nice and thin, like cotton candy. And that's going to fill in this whole space right here. So just like with my lines, I'm laying it out just how I would like. I'm going to get my popsicle stick, I'm going to fold it down, and now I'm going to use my needle to work. And just like with the outlining, I need to do lots of little pokes to attach that wool roving down. When my needle is going into my fabric, it is going straight up and down, vertical like a building. One last thing about these needles, artists, is they are very fragile. If I poke them at an angle like this, I'm going to break the needle. I always work straight up and down, tall like a building. If I work straight up and down, tall like a building, use my popsicle stick, I will have an awesome time creating a felted onomatopoeia.